Three, two, one. Welcome to the Godfo Universe podcast, very first ever book club. This is something we're going to be doing more of, and probably separate it from this one a week podcast, and make it its own thing. But
It's just as nerdy as it sounds, and I'm
yeah,
excited for it.
and to start off on a uplifting note, we've chosen George Orwell's 1984, which is a what did he say? What did that guy say when he heard a cop killer by body count? Where he's like, "Catchy little number, isn't it?" I forgot. It was like the chief of police or something like that. He's like, "Catchy little number, isn't it?"
Man, it's not a bright, sunshiny, feel good of a novel, but
No.
it is iconic.
it's it's wonderful at what it does, and it does something that no book really before it, or maybe even since, has done. And
And
yeah,
I would say too, like it's one of those books that even if you haven't read it,
yeah,
you've experienced it
yeah.
because it has influenced way more things than you even could possibly realize.
Mostly our government policy.
Man, it's wild how much of an impact it's had on everything.
Would you say
Like
it's had a deep impact?
a Morgan Freeman deep impact.
All right. Well, we did a brief overview of it in the last podcast, and we're not going to do that again here because we're just going to jump right into it. But if you guys want to, you can click um, on the one. I'll put a link to it in like the into the description. You can catch up there. And if you haven't read the book, I would suggest you start there. But or if you haven't and you just want to jump in with us, that's fine. We were kind of making this, we're announcing them like a week in advance so people can follow along. And then when they come back and listen to it later, it'll be in the sections that the book's divided into 1, 2, and 3, which are about 100 pages each. That's what I've seen.
Yeah, roughly, yeah.
Yep. And all right, well, let's just jump into it so they can follow along, and those from the future can too. So I kind of took kind of big notes, page by page, even and chapter by chapter, as they stuck out to me, and then consolidated them into ways that themes that show up and recurrences and things like that really like the big pillars of the book. And what I don't
Yeah.
want to do is, I don't want to get into some college death of the author thing. Like, what do you think it means to you? I want to get into like what he meant by what he said he meant, what actually happened
Right.
historically, and what the book tells us, and relate it to what is happening today, that we can not just extrapolate and be like, oh, it kind of resembles it. Like, no, like this ideology is the same one.
Yeah, yeah. No, there's a lot, and if you've never read it, like when you're going through it the first time reading it in 2024, it is shocking how much. I mean, obviously not everything, but it is shocking how much this guy wrote about that we are living right now, that we are seeing these things, these, like you said, ideologies. Man, it's a scary book.
Yeah, it really is.
It's a scary book. I challenge you to read it and not feel something. I don't know how you couldn't be uncomfortable reading this book.
Yeah, I mean, it's not Lolita, but yeah. That's one
I
when
said uncomfortable, not dirty.
yeah, not disgusted, not outraged. Yeah, that's one we'll never do. But all right, so the first part, we're immediately introduced to Wilson Smith, the protagonist, and basically the world he's in, it drops you right into it, and from the get go, the themes and the points just kick off. And like this is what we stated in the last video. Orwell clearly was a journalist, and clearly was a good journalist, which is really hard to find nowadays, because he makes almost everything known on page one. You almost could not find a better page one to define a book. Maybe I'm not saying objectively a better written page one, but to define a book within itself. Yeah, you almost won't find a better one. Do you have any
Yeah, I mean,
initial
it's
first thoughts like that?
well, just yeah, within the first page or two, the world is so well established that you feel like you can see it, you can smell it, like it's
Mm-hmm.
so. And he does a lot with very little. Like it's not one of those. He's not long-winded, so you don't get 3 pages describing what a room looks like. You get a throwaway line about how well the whole apartment building smells like sour boiled cabbage and like you and all and immediately you know exactly where you're at. Like you can feel the dank, humid, or cold, chilly. Like it's just, I don't know. He just has a really good way of putting you there without having to say a whole lot. And what struck me, and I knew it was there because I remembered it being there, but there's not a rising sense of it. It just right from the get go, this book hits you with dread
Mm-hmm.
and paranoia.
Yep.
Like you feel it on page one, you feel the dread and the paranoia of this character, like the idea of consistently having eyes on you
Mm-hmm.
and being
trapped in gray
terrified.
buildings. Like
Yeah, and it's just, man, it's scary.
it immediately goes into the idea we talked about in the last podcast, which was of institutionalization.
Mm-hmm.
You immediately feel like a rat in a cage or a rat in a
break
maze.
break down the individual, make them fall in line, and it's just it's yeah, like it's so well communicated right out the gate.
Yeah, and not to jump ahead, but the way the book's divided 1, 2, and 3, and I'm not going to spoil anything for you, but I kind of will because the book's like 70 years old or more, 80 years old, and we're going through it anyway. And I don't. Books were not used to be written to be, oh, you spoiled it, you ruined it. It's like, no, these were just good books. If you know the ending, who cares? You like,
Right.
So this whole section, not chapter one, section one, it introduces you to the world, and it does it immediately, and then it expands on it a little bit through the plot, which is what is so brilliant. There is huge blocks of exposition, but that's the plot. That to me is what's so brilliant about his writing, is when he does pages of exposition of Winston's head, that's plot. There's no separation. You know what I mean?
Right.
And section 2, and section 1 really explores all that. Section 2 is when, I hate to say a second plot, but it's like the main plot starts happening with him and Julia.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost a contrast, and this is what sets up the tragedy of the third part so much. It shows, it kind of contradicts everything that he says in the first section because he's found something different.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third section is you're kind of brought back into the fulfillment of the first section and that dread. And yeah, the whole first section is like you're standing on a knife's edge or standing over a cliff. To me, it always felt like your stomach's about to drop.
Yeah, you just feel on edge out the gate, and it gives me a similar feeling to what I get when I watch John Carpenter's The Thing. It's a very different kind of story, but I can't trust anybody. I don't know who is. He there's a character named O'Brien that I know we'll talk about later, and he sees that guy and he has this feeling that I think this guy could understand me, but like there's also that terror, that terror of maybe what if I'm reading him wrong? What if he's not what I think he is?
Mm-hmm. And the same thing with the girl Julia.
Yeah, with Julia as well, and he goes back and forth between attraction and revulsion with her.
Yeah, all of the natural instincts of even friend-enemy distinction are destroyed by the party and the world he's in.
Yeah,
and that's the whole point. And he says that but that's the thing is it's such a wonderful take on the human condition because he's a being, he's a man who's constantly aware of his thoughts and feelings and knows he's constantly aware that he can't trust them and knows that he can't trust and knows that he can't trust them, and it echoes and echoes and echoes and echoes and echoes, and that's the hell. That's the
Yeah.
consistent state
Yeah.
of the president of the party, and that's what doublethink is. And he introduces so many groundbreaking concepts in this first section. Even in the beginning of this first section,
Mm-hmm.
he presents I have them all written down. He presents doublethink. He
Mm-hmm.
presents help me out here. I had them all written down and I can't find
Well,
them.
just for a minute to expand on that, the idea of double speak or double think. I mean, this idea that you could completely and firmly hold two diametrically opposed viewpoints and switch back and forth between them and fully believe them.
Mm-hmm. You have to.
Yeah, you have to, because your life depends on your belief. And this idea that if anybody sees your mask come down,
Mm-hmm.
if even for a moment, they're going to turn you over.
Yeah, and actually with that, I heard something. What was it? Let me find it real quick so I don't mess it up. I forgot who said it. It was Orwell. How coincidental. It was
Imagine that.
It was in his essay, "Shooting an Elephant," where he says, or I'm gonna paraphrase it: "A man wears a mask and his face grows to fit it."
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you could. I'm sure entire tomes have already been written by that about that, but that's the best way to summarize doublethink.
Yeah, and yet we got doublethink. We get the Ministry of Truth, Thought Police.
Thought
all these different. Yeah, thought crimes, all these different ministries, Ministry of Peace, Ministry of Plenty.
Yeah, and they're all ironic.
Yeah.
Or lies, it's blatant lies.
Yeah, exactly. The Ministry of Truth, and you have somebody who works in the fiction department at the Ministry of Truth.
The Ministry of Plenty rations out food, and it's always cutting rations back.
Right, and like here at the beginning of the book, there's unrest because their chocolate consumption is going to get cut back. They're going to get less chocolate.
And then it comes out that it's going up.
Yeah,
and everyone believes it. Everyone knows rations are at 30 grams a week. It's now 25, and then by the end of the week, the party has everybody saying, "Oh, it went up from 20."
Yeah,
and they were the ones and that's the ultimate thing. They were the apparatus that made it go from 30 to 20. Every single person in there was involved in it, in the lie, and at the end of it, you believe the lie. And that's what, of course, Solzhenitsyn said in his essay "Live Not by Lies," which is also the name of our Volume 1 of Apollyon 20XX, which is coming out this soon, and very soon in this month will be available for purchase. How's that for an advert? So, but that's what he said, and that's why he said, let the lie come into the world, let it triumph, but not through me. And that's what Winston is seeing here, and that's the great cycle of debasement and humiliation that keeps you in line. You're a part of the lie.
While we're throwing out some of those terms, we get Big Brother here.
Yep, that's another one.
2 minutes hate. That's one I'd forgotten about that concept. So reading that, I was like, wow, the
newspeak.
Yeah, it's newspeak, and the eradication of language, like
deconstructionism.
Let's completely deconstruct our language to where we don't even need any of these words anymore.
Yeah, well, it's the final instep of postmodern deconstructionism, which Lewis saw in the Abolition of Man. That's what we'll get into that in just a second. Let me calm myself down. I don't want to jump ahead yet, but let's start with that. We did doublespeak. Doublespeak basically is knowing the party is lying and accepting the party's lie and doing both of them at the same time, and that's a terrible description of it. And I don't really want to read the entire his entire rundown of it, because it's very confusing out of context.
Right. But I mean, we see things like this happen all the time. You've got people who will cling to a disproven theory, right? They'll cling to whatever. And we see it in the political side. We see it in religion. We see it in a lot of places in our society today, to where you can have proof right in front of you that what you've been told isn't true, and yet somehow they can still see the evidence that it's not true and still hold on to it.
Mm-hmm.
Like dogmatically hold on to it because they're so committed to the party, right? They're so committed to whatever that team, whatever that politician, whatever that belief system is, that they can accept a lie that they know is a lie, and in their head it can be both a lie and the truth. They can know it's not true and believe it's true at the same time.
Yeah, it's the act holding two opposite, actually exclusive ideas in your head at the same time. And that's what doublethink is, and that's what war is peace. These are the three slogans of the party that are written everywhere: war is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength. And those are examples of doublethink. And those are the big ones. There's other ones, of course, but it's always that irony, and it's always that negation. Which again, that's a Marxist and postmodernist idea: the negation of truth, the negation of ideas, the negation of everything.
And we've talked about this a long time ago in one of our old episodes, but it's satanic because it's chaotic,
and it's mocking and destructive.
Exactly.
It denies the logos completely, and that's what deconstructionism does. Deconstructionism is the postmodern idea that basically that the utterances that come out of our mouth have no meaning. Because there is no meaning, that we just ascribe meaning even though we have no meaning and there is no meaning. And of course it just means everything is nothing and nothing is everything and nothing is nothing and everything is nothing. And that's what, but the logos is in the Christian concept. I'm going to let you actually give a proper definition of the logos because you studied this seminary term for this. Mr. Pastor, Mr. Minister, you're ordained now. Can you give us an uninitiated explanation of the logos?
All right. So, initially, when we think about logos, we're appealing to someone's logic, to their sense of reason. But in a biblical sense, the logos, I'm trying to find a way to explain it that's not.
It's what
it literally means word. It means speech, utterance, or message. In the Bible, in John 1:1,
which implies that words have a meaning.
Exactly, and John 1:1 says, "In the beginning was the Word." That's the Greek word logos. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Mm-hmm. And then later on, we see in that chapter, the Word became flesh and dwelt among men, meaning that Jesus was the Word incarnate, the Word made flesh. It's this idea that not only was all that was made by the Word of God. That's what we see in Genesis. God says, "Let there be light," and there was light. Mm-hmm. He speaks the universe into existence. We have the biblical concept too of there's like the power of life and death are in your tongue. You can speak life into people, or you can speak death into people.
Yeah, and that with that authority, it means that there's an objective and not a subject. It doesn't mean that you determine what light is, whether by that utterance of that of those phrases, but that there is a being who says, "Let there be," whatever word it is. Light is the English translation. If you want to use Aramaic, it doesn't matter. It matters is that exists.
A word was attached to a concept by the one who created it, and that is its meaning.
It is what it is, or I am that I am.
And I think one of the biggest ways that we see that today, and this is in no way is this turning into a political podcast. This is a book club, but a lot of look how much frustration there is over pronouns, personal pronouns now. Mm-hmm. And we're saying that words that have for centuries meant plural. They means plural, but now we're trying now they can mean singular
or an unknown third party.
Or some unknown. Yeah, it's it's a deconstruction of all of these words leads to a chaos of in communication. Mm-hmm. And that's what, when it comes down to Newspeak in 1984, that's the goal of the party, is to tear down all of these definitions so that nothing can be defined, and then everything gets defined by what the party says it is.
Exactly. That's what the whole point of quote unquote liberation in the capital sense, in the political science says liberation, and revolution, or in general, people think the first stage in thinking of believing liberation and revolution is thinking, oh, it's to create what we want.
Yeah,
It's
yeah, to remake
good,
the world in our
well, it's to think the objective good for everybody.
Right, and then I get to be the one who decides what that is.
Yeah, but not everyone believes or notices that. And then step 2 of
Right.
that is where we're at now in our own world, where to do that you have to destroy it. Like, and some people, rightfully identify it's a destructive, toxic, corrosive tool.
Mm-hmm.
It's to tear down an established order. The third part, which is what Newspeak actually is what you said, is the new speak that is the replacement of the old.
Mm-hmm. Right.
The idea of the liberation is literally, it's not liberating, it's to tear down, to enslave.
Yeah, you have to usurp.
Yeah, and that's the whole thing, is that because when you deal against the logos, anti-logos,
mm-hmm.
it's always anti. It can't help but be a lie. And
right.
Solzhenitsyn, he did that so well. He explained that so well. When he would call things the lie, he would personify it, because it's this.
Mm-hmm.
He understood it was this massive idea. It's because this was a favorite quote of Marx, which is from Mephistopheles, the demon in Faust, where he says, he believes everything that exists deserves to die. And the way Marx
mm-hmm.
would say that later is the negation of all that exists, the negation of all that is.
Right.
That is the anti-logos.
You see that so clearly from the beginning of this book, and I might be jumping ahead just a little bit, but really not much. In the book, Winston stops by a secondhand shop and he picks up a diary,
mm-hmm.
which he shouldn't have. It's something he shouldn't even want, but he does. And he has this moment when he finally gets home and he's situated himself where he can't be seen by the telescreen. Like nobody can watch him, at least theoretically. Nobody can watch him
mm-hmm.
and see what he's doing. And when he has the opportunity to use words to express what he feels, he doesn't know how to at first.
Yeah, he's been in the system for so long, and he realizes that's the end goal of it. There will be people who don't have the privilege he did of remembering a time before.
Yeah, and then when he does start this very childish stream of consciousness kind of writing that comes out of him, he goes from this ecstatic feeling of like it feels so good to do this to absolute horror when he realizes, as he answers the door, that he left the notebook open on the table and somebody could read it.
Yeah, and then from that to the acceptance and actual liberation, which is I'm prepared to die.
Yeah.
Which is the laying down of power, which is the opposite of the part. And we see that later through everything that they're
right.
It's all power for power's sake, because that's all any of this is. That's all any of this is.
But it demonstrates that the words themselves, the logos, the words themselves, they have power, because if they didn't, writing them down wouldn't matter.
Yeah, nobody would care.
Nobody would care if they really didn't have meaning, if they didn't actually have power, nobody would care. There's a reason why we live in a world that wants to take, all these classic books and and censor them, change them. Come in, throw away words they don't like and replace them with something that's got softer edges.
Yeah, or hardcore edges.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. We see some of that, and we see that some of that third part in our world, where things that have destroyed are now bringing in the replacement. And that's what always happens in revolution, is that once you've destroyed the old order, you erect the new one.
Yeah.
And that's all in there. It sounds like we're pontificating and bringing all this stuff, but that is what Orwell is saying, because we know that because we read his other writings. And
Yeah.
not to take away from 1940. It was just that that's how good he was to break down entire ideologies into like one or a few descriptors, like doublespeak, or
Hmm.
doublethink, newspeak, thought crime. He That's how brilliant he was.
Yeah.
He could
And
package
it's,
entire
I don't think,
ideologies in one phrase.
and really anybody could read this book, and I don't think you'd have to have
No,
somebody explain all this to you.
no, that's why it's so good, because he does it, and he does it much better than we just
So well,
did.
yeah. Yeah, so well. So, let's look at our protagonist at least a little bit, Winston. You know, there's a lot of first person narratives, and there's a lot of books that follow one character or multiple characters. uh Winston is not a I would say he's definitely not a heroic protagonist.
No.
um he's definitely not a wish fulfillment type of character where you like wish you could be this dude and have his his bravery or his qualities. He's a middle-aged guy who has seen too much and has come to hate the thing that he's been a part of creating.
Yeah, he's the average person looking at the world and realizing something's wrong.
Yeah, he's Neo in the Matrix, but with no
Yeah.
superpowers.
And to jump ahead some, you see that, well, and not even jumping ahead, because this is the idea of it. He doesn't realize it yet, that it's designed to weed out people like him.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The way the system works, the way all of these, putting the telescreens in their houses, and to the consistently making them see the the what is it, the 2-minute hate.
Yeah, you have to
And that was,
participate in it. Yeah, the 2 minute
yeah,
hate.
you have to participate in it. They know that most of the sheep are going to go along with no problem, and that most people are just going to fall right in line. And the people who can't, eventually it's going to push them to the point where they step up, and that's when they get smacked down.
But that is also the paranoia scheme of it, and the great mystery is like, are these people sheep around him, or are they all Winston? And that's the
Yeah.
question too. You don't know. Are some of them just lasting longer than him, or is it that they could all be like Winston and all find it unbearable, but because they won't do anything or say anything about it, their children and their children will be the ones that are slowly converted into it, until no one does
Right,
anything. But
right.
they're like the word. They're like
Yeah, and that we
they're
see
like the
some of
worst
that with
being broken.
O'Brien of like, I think he might be an enemy of the party. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, maybe he's an enemy of the party, or maybe he's not. Maybe he's pretending to be.
Mm-hmm.
He made eye contact with me. Maybe he saw it in me. Right?
Mm-hmm.
It's that constant back and forth in your head of, can I believe anything that I think?
Mm-hmm.
Can I believe anything I see in somebody else's face? And you bring out a good point about like the next generation. My favorite part of the whole my favorite my favorite part of the whole first section of the book, the whole, is when he goes to his neighbor's room to help her with her sink that's clogged.
Yeah.
And her kids are pretending to be thought police.
Yeah.
And they have this, what would normally be just a kid walks in pretending to be the police officer, put them up, but it legitimately terrifies Winston.
Yeah, because he realizes the children have power.
Yeah, and that these kids, not only is he scared of these kids, but their parents are scared of them too. Like their mom is scared of them, because they know that those kids, absolutely 100%, they are totally institutionalized.
Mm-hmm.
And if they see a glimpse on their parents' face that they are questioning the party, that kid will throw their parents to the wolves immediately.
Yep.
And they will grow up to be monsters.
Mm-hmm. And maybe even worse, they might realize they made a mistake, and it's too late, and now they're stuck in Winston's position.
Exactly.
It doesn't matter.
I think about when we think about the time period when this book was written, I'm sure that a lot of what he saw or what he's writing about has to do with Soviet Russia. It's certainly Oceania it feels like an analog for Cold War era Russia, Soviet Union. But I also think, with the kids, you put yourself in the position of a German during World War II era and Hitler's rise to power, and you think, I'm sure there were plenty of Germans who joined the Nazi Party who didn't believe and were not sold on it and didn't feel that way, but they knew this. They were scared not to fall in line.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm sure that they were probably scared of their kids because those kids grew up idolizing this man that they knew was a monster, but were too scared to stand up to. Right?
Yeah, they sold their children, and that's we talked about that briefly in the last episode. But that's the party's, however you want to define the party in the modern world. That is power. I would say power is greatest trig, and that we see that's what child sacrifice was. I'll convince these farming people that they have to give up their future, their children, to save it now, to either save the future now or save their present. And then you can control a populace because you've made them commit the most embarrassing humiliation thing, and that's the thing is. And James Lindsay has identified this a lot and stuff in some of his work against kind of what's happening now, where he was talking kind of about giving in to kind of cancel mobs and that stuff. He's like, if you bend the knee once, that's all it takes, because even if you try to stand up again, they'll always remind you of the time that they controlled you.
Yeah.
It will always be like that, and that's how these ideologies work. It's just bent on destruction and humiliation of the human person.
Right.
If you can make someone hate themselves, you can control them.
Right. So where do you want to take this next, man?
Let me look at my notes here because I don't want to introduce it to people as if they're not in it, because this is a book club. You don't explain things to people. You talk about what you've all read.
Right.
Thought crime is another thing to go into. In thought crime, the way he explains it, he says thought crime isn't death. Thought crime doesn't lead to death. It is death.
Mm-hmm.
And thought crime is basically just anything that is reality, basically. And that's the thing is you realize in thought crime that what you've committed isn't actually a crime, because there's no laws, which goes back to that idea of liberation. Oh, we're liberated because we got rid of all the laws, but now we kill anyone who thinks differently.
Yeah, right,
and
right.
Of course, that's more than irony, but so what thought crime is him realizing that it's reality and truth, and someone who realizes it can't deny it, so they're just a dead man walking because they're under an engine that destroys truth or seeks to. You can't help it. Once you realize truth, that's it. He's speaking to the power of the logos, the power of reality, and that's actually more an optimistic thing in the book if you actually look at it. Whoever recognizes that as a dead man walking in destruction, but it shows the power of truth that the party has to consistently be against it. It takes all its effort to be against it, and that's why the devil never rests.
Yeah, exactly. Never takes a day off.
Can't afford to. So, that's what I was discussing with thought crime, but I wanted your opinion on that.
Yeah. Well, when you think about it, even now, in the world we live in today, you can't be arrested for thinking something wrong, at least not yet. But, we already see how society will violently oppose anybody who has a different way of looking at things.
Yep.
And whether that's politically, whether that's in the realm of science, if you dare to offer up a different hypothesis, you get crucified in the social scene about it. But it's not that hard to believe that something could get to that point. We already have people who have been arrested for refusing to acknowledge certain well, certain pronouns and things like that, like at in a workplace. There are people who have been arrested for that. Yeah,
Yeah,
one of the things,
or
I,
deplatformed for questioning certain
yeah, get
results.
canceled for it. And that's, our founding fathers were definitely not perfect, but when they wrote the Constitution, one of the things that I really do love about it is that they understood, because they had just got done fighting back against a tyrant. They understood that if you give people power, if we build a government and we give people power, one of the things they're going to try to do is control everybody's, through their speech. So they made sure that there was a Bill of Rights and all these things, and one of the things they protected was your right to say whatever you want to say.
And then your right to defend that right to say it.
Exactly. And that was brilliant foresight
Yeah.
on their parts.
Yeah, and people know that, especially the opponents of it know that, which is why it takes so much to destroy it. It's why it's always targeted. and and we see that in so many things. And I thought this was kind of cool too, actually. If we want to kind of get a little spicy into things, um, on page 4, he describes the Ministry of Truth, and he kind of describes all of the ministry buildings, and
Right.
they're a pyramid structure. And first of all, that's a foreign structure. You don't find that in London. You see what I'm
Yeah.
saying? And
Yeah.
it's an
Yeah.
ancient, it's an old structure,
Yeah.
but
Exactly.
it's the newest, like, and most well kept structure there. So you see those kind of things. It's a culture taking more care of the new foreign old idea and making it look as new and unforeign as possible.
Right.
And I think that speaks to a lot of things. I mean, I think that's, even if we wanted to get really into some esoteric stuff, like that's what C.S. Lewis was kind of doing with Merlin and the head in that hideous strength. And
Mm-hmm.
here's the scientific community. Here's all these supposedly brilliant men, and they're dedicating all their time and all their energy into magic, but they don't realize it.
Right.
And but that's what a lot of this ideology does. And these different kind of ideologies that choose power is what Nazism did. This is what socialism, of course, did. Marxism. It takes this foreign thing, this thing that isn't part of your society, and it supplants your society with it, and it makes you worship it, basically.
Right. Right.
And maybe I'm reading too much into that, but I mean, I don't think he wasted words by doing that, because he describes the rest of London, this brilliant old city, and it's decaying and destructive. The only thing that looks new is this foreign, ancient design that's the newest thing and
Mm-hmm.
most well kept.
Well, and even that urban decay is just playing into, we don't maintain any of that stuff anymore.
Yep. It's old.
No, it's old. Why would we? Why would we spend any time or effort or money maintaining something old? And that's, you see a lot of that now in colleges and universities. You have so many people pushing these ideas that the ancient people were fools compared to us. What's old, history doesn't matter. And history was written and by people who made it whatever they wanted it to be. You can't believe in any of it, and those people were all bloodthirsty fools, or all of those people were just evil, flawed creatures. The reality is there's a lot we can learn from the past.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's a great value in preserving the past, specifically in preserving the history and the writings of these people, whether we agree with everything they wrote or not. To just let all of that stuff go to rot is a horrible thing, but that's what we're seeing happen.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's the complete and utter eating away and destruction of a culture. And I mean, but that's what socialism and fascism and Nazism did. And like with Nazism, Hitler brought back a lot of Aryan ideas, like pagan ideas that weren't
Mm-hmm.
entirely correct, but it didn't matter. He just brought in something, and he's replaced Christianity with it, and he replaced everything else with it. socialism. I mean, that goes back to the French Revolution, even before what we call
Mm-hmm.
socialism. Like they destroyed the churches and called it the new cult of reason and cult of logic and all that kind of stuff. And
But see, again, that's what always happens is those same destructive ideologies always rise back to the surface whenever this stuff starts happening.
mm-hmm.
It always comes. They give it a new name sometimes, but it's the same thing.
Yeah. And let's go with the 2 minute hate. The 2 minute hate. I mean, that's unsettlingly close to just Twitter. I mean,
Yeah, I had the exact same thought. That's one of the most striking parts in the whole first section to me, because just the idea of everybody. And I'll give an example of what it made me think about. You know, every time something happened, let's say the Ukraine, the war in Ukraine,
the current thing.
you saw, yeah, you saw when all that started, you saw people, especially people like you said on Twitter, on Facebook, who are celebrities and things like that. They all had to start putting those Ukrainian flags on their profiles.
Yeah, the foreign thing.
Or something, or some kind of hashtag or something to show where their support is, because if they failed to support it,
mm-hmm.
not if they just left it alone, if they failed to support it, then it was automatically assumed that you're against.
Oh, everybody remembers the black squares for BLM.
Oh yeah. Yeah. If you don't put that in your profile, well, you hate black people, or you hate this, you hate that, you're against. And so you have to participate, or you're going to be ostracized for it. Here, if you don't participate with the, they've taken this man who initially was with the party, right? He was a hero in the party, but now he's their Satan. And if you don't boo and hiss and jeer along with everybody else, well, maybe you like this guy. Maybe you're an enemy of the party too, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's such a brilliant idea. And the way he describes it is so, like you said, it's unsettling.
Well, what's funny is there's the 2 minute hate, and there's all these other things like these little activities that he does such a good job of describing as as the biggest waste of time that nobody wants to be at. But
yeah.
nothing is mandatory, but everything's mandatory.
Right. Well, what's really scary about it is, from the oldest to the youngest, initially, it starts off with let's just go through the motions, get it over with. But it lasts for long enough that the people get caught up in it.
Mm-hmm.
They get passionate about it. And Winston even feels it working on himself.
Yeah, because the thing is, that's the cynicism of the party is. They'll have to do it out of habit, and so it will change them, or at least that's what they think. Now it doesn't work here. But I mean, he's portraying, when you are a materialist and you kind of Rousseauian blank slate, and you think society makes man and there is no internal human nature, you think you can remake people. And that's what this is,
Mm-hmm.
And it's a powerful tool. It doesn't ultimately work, as we've seen from society in the past, but I mean, it is unbearable. It is so powerful, the weight of that.
It works in the short term.
Yeah. And that's in I've got the book here. I just can't reach it. It's called Thought Reform and let me pull up. And the Psychology of Totalism by Robert J. Lifton, and it's a great book for people who really want to get into. It's the he interviewed and researched people who were, like, foreigners in particular, who were captured and detained and brainwashed. Literally, the term was invented for this process by Maoist China,
mm-hmm.
which is, more communism. And it just details the horrors of literally they thought they could brainwash people. They invented the red communists invented the term brainwashing as a positive thing. And a lot of it is just that. It's just if you get people to say something over and over, if you get people to write something, which was even more powerful, you get them to write something over and over and over, you get them to participate in it, they will change. That was their idea. And really all it really did was break people and just, because that's what all it can do, It didn't convert them, it just broke them. But they didn't care,
I mean, there's a reason why we have our children stand up every single day in a classroom and say the Pledge of Allegiance.
Yeah. Yeah. But that's the thing is, if you didn't believe words have power, if you didn't believe in the logos, why would you have people say things over and over and over if there wasn't an ascribed meaning, And that's part of the contradiction. That's part of the contradiction. And as to self-promote again, we kind of go into this a good bit in Apollyon 20XX Revelations, where Theo Jules kind of always says it, it's power, it doesn't matter.
Right.
The meaning, the why, the what, and the even the how, and none of it matters. It's just power seeking for power's sake. It's a personification of it. And Orwell does that brilliantly in the third part, of course. If people, if you want to read like a comic book example of it, it's what V does to Evie in V for Vendetta to get her to understand his point of view. I think this is a bold statement, but not really. A lot of people have read that. They've read like Alan Moore, but they haven't read Orwell, and Orwell does it way better. But I think Moore knows that.
Oh yeah, I think he would say so too.
Yeah, so I'm fine saying that. But yeah, and they say in that Goldstein, who's the man they showed during the 2-minute hate, at page 13, he was advocating freedom of speech, freedom of press, freedom of assembly, freedom of thought. And
how dare he?
Well, that's the whole thing. But man, we are very close to that.
Yeah.
How many times in the past couple of years have you heard, freedom of speech is dangerous, or all this kind of stuff? And
you can't say that. You can't just say that. Well, yeah, actually I can. Yeah. You don't have to like it. You don't have to agree with it, but I can certainly say it.
Yeah. Well, and there's a whole thing with hate speech that we could go into, and it's like, that's a creeping encroachment on the freedom of speech. Let's be honest.
Of course it is.
Whoever describes what hate is gets to describe what hate speech is. Who describes what hate speech is gets to throw people in prison.
Well, that's the thing is that they're trying to reach the point where you can say something that they don't like, and that can be considered, well, it's a hate crime. That was assault. They've said words are assault.
Words are violence.
Now. Yeah, words are violence now. Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Well, if words are violence, then they have to have meaning. But that's the whole thing.
Exactly.
But that's the thing, like logic, if I can step out for a second, but that's what Orwell does with it. He shows it so well. Logic does not matter to these kind of systems and beliefs. They mock logic by using logic wrongly, and they use it wrongly in a way that or as Solzhenitsyn said, they're lying. We know they're lying. They know we know that they're lying. We know they know that we know they're lying. They know we know that they know that we know that they're lying. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Right.
It's just power, and that's what that's what it comes down to at the end in part 3. I'm not going to go into it too much, but that's what Winston learns, unfortunately, and he knew it. That's the whole thing. Everyone knows it.
Exactly.
A dog on the street knows what power is. It's the other dog that's bigger than you.
Exactly.
But and that's not nihilist. I mean, of course, there's might makes right and that kind of whole thing, and some people the Ubermensch and all that kind of idea. That doesn't mean might makes right. It just means might is. And
I think the other thing about these kinds of systems is that they're designed in a way. And the fact of them using the pyramid is not, that works on a bunch of different levels because you level everybody out down at the bottom, but there's always someone at the top of that pyramid that benefits from the system.
Yeah, and it's less and less of them.
Exactly. It always comes down to that very small handful, or the big brother, whoever. You look at that, and like, you go to any of these communist countries and you look at the home of the average citizen or comrade or whatever you want to call them, they live in squalor, right? Go look at the palace that the leader lives in.
Mm-hmm.
The systems are built so that the people can be exploited.
Mm-hmm. And they know they are.
Yeah, and then they'll love you for it.
Mm-hmm.
And die for you for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's that's just more of the horror of it. And in page 16, the 2-minute hate lasts like 2 or 3 pages.
Yeah, it's a lengthy portion,
but you don't really realize it. At least I didn't realize. But
no, it's very captivating.
Yeah, in page 16, he says it ends with, "But the face of Big Brother seemed to persist on the screen. What they do is they kind of hot cold you. They throw your hatred, and then they show the thing you're supposed to love, so that you direct your relief onto it. That's a psychological trick. But the face of Big Brother seemed to persist for several seconds on the screen, as though the impact that it had made on everyone's eyeballs were too vivid to wear off immediately. The little sandy-haired woman had flung herself over the back of the chair in front of her with a tremendous murmur that sounded like 'My Savior.' She extended her arms toward the screen, then she buried her face in her hands. It was apparent that she was uttering a prayer." Yeah, and that's and if a modern writer had written that, critics would say it was too on the nose. But it's like, no, that's reality. This is a religion, and
yeah,
I mean, I hate to say it, man, but again, to promote our stuff, and Apollyon 26 Revelations that's coming out soon this month. Is everything? Politics is just religion. It's
exactly
all of this stuff. Every ideology is philosophy is just religion. You can't. Religion is just the oldest human. It's the basest and oldest human way of understanding the world. And anytime you do that, even the atheist, then that's a religion, because you put all of your faith in that idea. Any ideas that define and shape your view of reality, and even then ascribe a moral way of dealing with that reality, is a religion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it always comes with the looming threat of damnation.
Yeah. It always has to. So we've gone off of the woods a little bit and the kind of concepts, but what actually happens in chapter 1 is, it's like I said, from a story standpoint, is very little. It's kind of Winston going through. You're just kind of seeing the world through his eyes as he goes every day, and what actually happens is he details how he got the diary. You see his kind of little transgressions during the week. Maybe he hesitates too long. Maybe you get his thoughts on the world. You see his job, where he literally rewrites history for Big Brother.
Creates new people to replace the old.
And everyone around him is basically doing the same thing, and they all know it, and everyone's participating in it. And there's all these emotions. There's shame, guilt, hatred of yourself, and then there's hatred of the people around you, because you're competing with them for the love of this thing you hate. It's whose story will get picked up. He goes great detail to mention that, like, hey, we're probably working on the same story to replace history, but he wants his to go through, and he hates it. And it's all that cycle. It's that cycle of humiliation, shame. It's basically, if you want to get into Christian theology, I mean, that's what sin is. I hate to say brilliance, but you know what I mean by that. The brilliance of sin is, it entices you, and then it whips you for doing what it told you to do, and then it picks you back up and entices you again, and it's that same thing over and over and over and over again.
Right.
And, yeah. So it's the metaphysical as well as the physical reality, and that's why it's such a damning book. That's why it's so hard and heavy and real. And he goes, I'm not trying to belittle the plot, because the plot is good, It's
The
just
plot is good, but plot is just a launch pad. Like the story is what is how the plot is what moves the story, gets the ball rolling. But what really is powerful about this book, more even than any of the actual story devices themselves, is just the setting to me.
Yeah.
And all of the stuff that's happening in the world that's being described, and how how powerless anybody is to stop it at this point.
Yeah, the plot, it moves so smooth. Like I said, there's exposition and explanation while the plot is happening, and it's so seamless. It's you can talk about what's happening, like what he's doing, and that's important, but there's just so much in that, which is what we've discussed, and that's from him waking up to shaving, to going to fixing a sink, to doing his job, to going to the little shop and buying the paperweight, and then seeing Julie, and he always sees this girl that he's convinced hates him and it wants to turn him in and all this kind of stuff. And I feel like you could do 8 hours on this easily. So I'm not trying to limit it, and I don't mind doing a part 2 of chapter 1 or of part 1. And we'll fill that out from this week, but I'm going to have to cut it in just a few minutes.
Yeah.
But I feel like we could mine this over and over and over and over again. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some of the notes we've discussed and some of the notes I've done, and I'm going to kind of formalize them into an article or sorts, or a little essay of sorts, and upload it too for everybody on our site. And I'll send out an email if you guys will go to our site and join the mailing list. You'll get access to this and that and a lot more other stuff. But I feel like that's a pretty good place for us to kind of end it right now, because I feel like other than that we could go on for 4 hours.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's such a rich text. It really is. And I hope that other people, like, maybe you hadn't started yet and you've listened to this and you're like, yeah, this is something I want to get in on. Man, this book is not hard to find. You can find audiobooks and listen to it in the car. I mean, it's not hard to find, and I'm pretty sure you can find even a free copy of it somewhere online.
Oh, yeah. You can probably go to archive.org,
PDF or whatever. But try to catch up at least, the first few chapters. Try to read book 1, and we'll sort of pick up where we left off on the next episode whenever that comes together. But read the book with us. We'd love to have conversations with you over this. So, like, get in the comment section on the YouTube, or even on our Facebook page or on Instagram, wherever you want to find us. We're easy to find. We want to talk about it. Like, what is your read on the first part of this book? Like, what do you think about the character? What do you think about some of these themes and ideas that we've discussed? Thought crimes and double mind, double think, and newspeak and all that stuff. Like, get involved with it. Like, it's a book club. Yep. We want to hear your thoughts on it.
Yep. Apollyon 20.
Also,
yep, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Apollyon 20XX, Live Not by Lies, which is our very first graphic novel. It's volume 1 of Apollyon 20XX. Is coming very soon. Will be available for pre-order this month. We're going to do a pre-launch page, hopefully by next week. So get on board with it. And we discuss a lot of these very same themes, and we do it very in depth. And if you enjoy 1984, we hope you enjoy that as well.
Yep. So yeah, be on the lookout. By Thanksgiving, you'll be able to go ahead and start helping crowdfund and pre-order this book. It's been a labor of love. It's taken a lot of blood, sweat, and tears to get it together. But man, I'm very proud of what we've come up with. I feel like we've polished it well, and it's ready for release. So thank you for everybody who's followed us, and I keep getting messages like, when's the book coming out? And I'm glad that there are people excited to read it. We're excited for you to get to read it. So excited that we are also going to very soon have the first chapter, the entire first issue, 30 something pages up on our site for you to read and enjoy. We're not just giving a page or two of art. We want you to actually be able to read the first chapter of this book.
Yep. All right. Thanks, guys. Thanks for stopping by. And next week we'll have part 2.
Yep.
All right.
Peace.